I'm Mark Berry, and this is the Storytellers Showcase, where we bring you good stories by great storytellers. Well, I don't know about today, because I'm going to share stories with you today. If you'd like to contact me and get links to more shows, or if you'd like to be on the show, we record in Auburn, California, just email me. I'd love to hear from you. This story that I have for you today is called Hunting Season. Hunting season takes place in Northern California, and it starts a long time ago, when I was about 7 years old. That would be 70 years ago now. You see, my folks and I lived in San Francisco. I'm an only child, and my mother's uncle had a cabin in the mountains up way beyond a little town called Iowa Hill. If you know Northern California, Iowa Hill is about 13 miles up in the mountains from the town of Colfax, if you know the area. It is very rural. It is it's just mountains and animals and trees. That's all there is. Well, my mother drug him to San Francisco to live, and he never liked the city or the people or the buildings close together. And he liked to get out, and we'd often go to the cabin, and I loved to go with him. You know why? Well, back then in the 1950s in San Francisco, me and all my buddies, we were watching TV, and the shows that were on back then were shows like Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett, and shows like that. And we all fantasized about being frontiersmen and explorers and wilderness guys. And some of my friends, if they could afford it, they even had that cap. They had that coonskin cap with the brown and black tail running down the back. And a couple of my friends had skunk skin caps, black and white. So when I got to go with Dad, I was ready to go. Now, this story happens when I'm 7. It's in the spring. We've waited until the snow has probably melted enough so that we could get into the cabin up in the mountains. And here we go. Now, it's a long drive from San Francisco to Iowa Hill. And when we got to Iowa Hill, we always had to stop at the store. What's the store? That's a story in itself. The store was one building, and it was surrounded by a few cabins. The sign said population 16. It never changed in 50 years. The store consisted of, well, it was the one working telephone. This is long before cell phones. It was the gas station. It was the mayor's office. It was the post office. It was the food market. It was the liquor store, the tavern, the pool hall, and 4 or 5 other things that I'm forgetting right now. It was quite an establishment. Well, we always had to stop for Dad to get his beer. He'd go up to the bar and grab a beer, and pretty soon he'd be on his second one. And they were bringing out 2 cases of beer for him to take with us up to the cabin. That's what he needed to get through one weekend. And I was bored during all of this, naturally, a 7-year-old kid. And I heard a commotion this particular time. I heard a commotion in the grocery store part of the store. And I looked to see what was going on. There were people gathered. And when I looked to see what they were gathered about, it was a fawn. It was this beautiful little baby deer with white speckles on its back and spindly, wobbly legs. It was very young, very newborn. Turned out on that windy mountain road, the mother had been accidentally killed by a car. And so now what are we going to do with this little baby deer? Everybody had an idea, of course, as people do. And Mrs. Baxter, she and Mr. Baxter owned and operated the establishment at that time. Mrs. Baxter hit on a technique. She ground up some cornflakes into a powder with a rolling pin, and there were no bottles or nipples or anything, so she got a Playtex living glove, and she put the cornflakes in there and then put cow's milk in there and made a slurry out of that and cut the tip off of one of the fingers of the glove and held it out to the little deer. And oh, was he hungry. He was going for that like you couldn't stop. He was so hungry that you get tired holding it. And so somebody else would take over, and then somebody else. When it was my turn, oh my God. Don't you think I was in heaven? Here I was feeding my own pet deer. Oh my God, it was awesome. Well, the little guy lived. And after 2 or 3 days, they decided, I guess he's going to be with us. We might as well give him a name. So the Iowa Hills folk put on their thinking caps. They put their brains together, and they decided that we'll call him Buck. That's what we'll call him. And so now we have a new resident of Iowa Hill, our mascot, Buck the deer. Well, Buck and I had a love that few could approach. Every time we went up there, every time we went in or out of the cabin, we had to stop at Iowa Hill, and I'd look around and see if Buck was around, and usually he was, and we would hug, and he would lick, and I would pet, and we just loved each other and loved seeing each other each time. Of course, they didn't keep him locked up indoors up in the mountains. I mean, he needed to be a deer after all, and so after he was steady on his legs and stuff, they let him go outside, and he'd usually come in and sleep. And then as he grew, his ventures outdoors became longer and longer, but he'd always come back. And Mrs. Baxter planted lots of yummy greens out behind the store, lettuce and other yummy things, and Buck would come back for that, and the petting and the love. We were his family, after all, the only birth family he ever knew. Fast forward now. 5 years. I'm now 11, 7, 5, anyway, I'm 11 or 12. And now it's fall. Now we're going up to the cabin to close it up for the winter because it gets snowed in. So it's fall. I'm about 11, and naturally we stop at the store because Dad has to get his beer. And but now I'm a big guy, and so when we stopped at the store, I went out back to see if Buck was there, and he was. As you know, in the fall in Northern California, in the mountains, it is hunting season. Well, Buck was now 4 years old, and he was a stag. He was this beautiful buck. He had 4 points on each side, and he looked to me like Bambi's father from the movie. I tell you, he was something else. But we still knew each other since we were kids. So I went out, and I'd hug him and pet him, and he'd lick me, and we had this wonderful, except for that ridiculous bow around his neck. Mrs. Baxter had found, I don't know where she found this red ribbon. You could have used it to gift wrap a car. The ribbon was that big. She tied this great big red ribbon around Buck's neck, tied a great big ridiculous bow on the red ribbon, because it's hunting season after all, and it had worked so far. He was still with us after all these years, but it looked so silly. Anyway, after Buck and I had our reunion, and then I wanted to see what the guys were doing, because I was old. I was 11 now, So I went into the tavern, and they were shooting pool, and they humored me. They let me try the stick, and although I couldn't keep both feet on the ground, they let me try a couple of pool shots, and because I was like a mascot to them also, me and Buck. Well, all of a sudden, we were blinded by the light. You couldn't see a thing. And finally, when the lights went out, we could see out the window, there was this vehicle. And climbing down from this vehicle were 2 men. And when they came in, wow, they looked like they just stepped out of a sporting goods magazine. They were covered from head to toe with the latest, the water repellent, the Gore-Tex, the gaiters, the pants, the jackets with zippers and pockets all over the place, even stuff hanging off of the zippers. There was, I could recognize some of it. That was a snake bite kit. That was a compass. That was a whistle. And there was stuff that I couldn't recognize dripping from their outfits. And they both had the hat. Now, I'd seen that hat in the sporting goods catalog. You could wear it like 12 different ways. You could wear it up with ear flaps for warmth. It even had a little camouflage thing you could pull down and you could see through it, but it camouflaged your face for deer. Oh boy, these guys were decked out. They came in, sat down, ordered a beer, and immediately they started whining and complaining. spent our whole week's vacation up here. People told us this was a place to hunt for deer. We've been up here, we built a blind, we've been rattling antlers, we've been putting out urine scent, we've been doing everything, tracking no deer, not even any sign of any deer. There are no deer on this mountain anywhere. Well, Iowa Hill folks like nothing better than to give the business to flatlanders, as they call them. And boy, these guys were ripe for it. And so, almost as if they'd rehearsed it, the Iowa Hill folks said, "No deer? Are you kidding? They're pests. They're underfoot. We got to try and get rid of them." Bob, you tell him about your pick. He said, "Yeah, the other day I forgot to roll up the window on my pickup truck. The deer were in there eating the upholstery." And Jake, what did happen to you last week? He said, "Well, yeah, I was walking in my cabin, and before the screen door could slam shut behind me, there was a deer walking in there trying to get some food from me." And oh, they had stories, and they built upon each other's stories, as I said, like it was choreographed. These flatlanders were having nothing to do with it. They knew when their legs were being pulled. They weren't buying a bit of it. Well, about that time, Mr. Baxter went over to open the front door as if to let the smoke out or something like that, and Mrs. Baxter caught my eye and she cocked her head towards the back door. Well, I didn't know what was going on, but I sure didn't want to miss out on anything. So I sauntered over to the back door so that I wouldn't draw attention, as if anybody would notice me anyway. And when Mrs. Baxter and I got to the back door, there was Buck, naturally, with a ridiculous ribbon and bow on his neck. And Mrs. Baxter started removing the ribbon and bow from his neck. And I started to get the idea because she pointed his nose towards the back door, took off the bow. So I went around to the other end of Buck. And when she gave me the sign, I gave him a friendly swat on his rump. And Buck went into the tavern, where he grew up there, it was his place. Anyway, here comes this stag into the tavern, and his shiny black hooves, when they hit that old plank floor, sounded like a machine gun. As he came in there, and he went right by the two guys that are sitting here at the bar at a pool table, he went right by those two flatlanders that were sitting there with all their outdoor gear, and bam, 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 and went out to the front door. Well, no sooner had Buck started in the back door than the Iowa Hill folks started in. "Baxter, there's another one in here. We told you to keep that back door closed. Can't you keep him out of here? That's the third one today." And oh, they were just on and on and on. Again, like it was choreographed. And those two flatlanders, their eyes were as big as saucers, their mouths were hanging open, no words coming out. They threw down the money for their beer. They got up silently. They walked out the front door. They climbed into that vehicle. And they turned around and they putt-putted down that hill, never to ever be seen in those parts ever again. That's Hunting Story. Hunting Season by Mark Berry.